Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. We are heading into the second day of the trial for the Doomsday cult mom, Lori Vallow Daybell. This is the 49-year-old mother facing conspiracy and first-degree murder charges in connection with the deaths of her two children, 7-year-old J.J. Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan, as well as that of 49-year-old Tammy Daybell. This is the deceased wife of Lori's current husband, Chad Daybell. And talking about Chad for a second, Chad is actually facing similar charges and will face a separate trial at a later date. Why? Well, we have to remember that the bodies of these children were found on his property. Also, he's charged with the actual murder of Tammy as well. Now, let's talk about what happened yesterday with opening statements. The very beginning of this trial, our very own Gigi McKelvey was in the Ada County Courthouse, soaking it all in for us. She is our eyes and our ears. And now let's hear what she had to say.
Gigi McKelvey outside the Ada County Courthouse, where we're expecting the first full day of testimony today. Yesterday saw opening statements in the case where prosecutors say that Lori Vallow used power, money, and sex to get what she wanted and wasn't afraid to take anybody or anything out of the way of her goal. They also talk about how the one thing she wanted was Chad Daybell, and he was married. So what happens to Tammy Daybell? She ends up dead. They showed some graphic photos of the remains of all three victims yesterday. First up on the stand was Kay Woodcock, who is the grandmother to J.J. Vallow and also the sister of Charles Vallow, two of the victims in this very twisted case. She talked about the last few times that she saw J.J. on FaceTime after the murder of her brother back in July at the hands of Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Said that the communications were different. J.J. didn't call frequently. When he did call, he wasn't using his iPad like he normally would and looked like he was being coached as he looked over his shoulder, and those calls were seconds long, which is unlike J.J. Next up on the stand was Brandon Boudreaux, the ex-nephew-in-law of Lori Vallow, who was married to Melanie Pulowski, Lori's niece, who was also in this group. He talked about the breakdown of his marriage due to the beliefs of this group and Melanie hanging out with this group of people. Also, he talked about when he had to go identify JJ's body for Kay and Larry. He had just gotten married the day before and made the trip to Rexburg so that Kay and Larry would not have to do that. Today, we expect Ray Hermosillo on the stand. He's a Rexburg detective who's been on this case since day one. He was there when the bodies were found and has been on this case up till today. So I think he will give us a lot of insight into things we don't yet know. Interested to see what he has to say. He's expected to be on the stand all day. Not sure we'll get to another witness, but keep it here at Law and Crime News, and we'll keep you updated with every witness and every event that happens in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. I'm Gigi McKelvey for Law and Crime.
Excellent reporting, Gigi. Thank you so much. And just to add something to that, I want to talk about what the defense did in their opening statement. So the defense told the jury in their opening to focus on Lori, that this is her trial. It's not about what Chad or Alex Cox did, but what she allegedly did. And they said, look, she has an alibi, that she was in her apartment when the kids were killed. They said that the jury needs to hold the state to their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, particularly since they argued that the state threw out a number of different theories under the conspiracy and murder charges. Did Lori conspire? Did she carry out the killings? Did she do something in furtherance of it? Basically, they're saying to the jury that the state isn't sure what happened, but they're asking you to figure it out. So you heard both sides there. We're going to continue to cover the Lori Vallow Daybell case here at Law and Crime, and that's all we're going to have to report on that. But we're going to be sure to be back later with Gigi to give us a report on what's happening in day two. We're going to switch gears right now. Before I sign off, we're going to head to Colorado for the continuation of the stepmom murder trial. As we wait for proceedings to begin this morning, we want to pick up where we left off yesterday with the testimony of Detective Tim Farrell with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office.
And what were your assigned roles with the Sheriff's Office?
I was assigned to the Special Victims Unit within the Investigations Division.
Were you asked to assist in the investigation in the disappearance of Gannon Stout?
I was.
And back on January 28th of 2020, was one of your duties or assignments to go out and search 6627 Mandan Drive here in Colorado Springs, Colorado?
Yes, it was.
And why were you going out to search that residence?
Initially, the call came in as a missing juvenile endangered, which is why it got referred to investigation. So we went out to try to figure out where the child had gone, whether we could find any evidence, whether they ran away, whatever the case might be. So we were just trying to figure out what exactly happened to see whether we were able to gather any evidence.
Did you have any idea what you were looking for when you went out there?
Not at that point, no.
About what time did you get out there on the 28th? Do you recall?
The house, I believe it was around 10 p.m.
Okay. Who was there when you got there? Do you remember?
Besides the other detectives, I believe Harley was the only other person on scene at that time.
Did you know whether or not Lena, the 8-year-old child, had already been taken to go be interviewed?
I'm not sure on that now.
As you're out there on the 28th, you said around 10 p.m., were you getting information from the police department, the sheriff's office, as to the investigation, as to items you may want to look for, things like that?
Yes, through the sergeant.
Were people being interviewed at the sheriff's office and giving information and relaying it back to you as to what you should be looking for?
Yes, they were.
So what did you know prior to going into the residence at 6627?
I knew that patrol had been called in the day prior for a runaway. They had not found any evidence as far as had not found the child on scene, hadn't been able to locate him. And beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot of information when we got there. Once we arrived on scene, the information was pretty sporadic at that point. We didn't have a whole lot to go on.
So what was the game plan? What'd you do when you got there?
Basically, we went in, took photographs of the entire scene. One of the other detectives took those. And then we basically just went through looking for something or anything out of the ordinary or something that might help point us toward where he might have went or what had happened.
And did you and your fellow detectives search the entire house, every room in the house?
Yes, we did.
Did you find any loose shell casings that looked like they had been expended from a gun?
I did not know.
Would that be something that would be unusual or suspicious if you found a shell casing on a floor somewhere?
Yes, it would.
Did you see any blood in the house?
Not visually, no.
Would that again be something that would be suspicious, draw your attention to that?
Yes, it would.
You said you went through and you took photographs within the house. Did you take photographs of the exterior and the interior of the house?
I believe so. It was another detective that took the photographs.
Would you recognize those photographs if you saw them again?
Yes, I would.
In front of you to your right are a stack of photographs. If you could take a look at those, and for the record, those would be People's Exhibit 240, 241, 242 through 245, 247, 248, 250, 251, and we'll stop at 251 when you get there.
The laundry room area.
And are there pictures of some Nike shoes that are on a washing machine?
Yes, there are.
And do all those pictures, I'll be specific for the record, People's Exhibit 240 through 245, 247, 248, 250, and 251, do they all depict the laundry room at 6627 Mandan Drive as it looked like on the night of January 28th, 2020?
Yes, it does.
And are we would move to admit those particular exhibits?
Defense?
Objection.
Exhibits 240 through 245, 247, 248, 250, and 251 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Request to publish 240.
Go ahead.
What do we see in People's Exhibit 240 here on the TV screens?
This is the entrance from the garage into the laundry room.
And could you, we got a stick pointer up there. Spans, do you see that anywhere? Yeah. Can you just kind of point out some things that I asked you about? For instance, can you point out the entry to the garage in this photograph? In this door right here. And do you see a dryer or a washer there on the right? And is there appear to be a shoe rack there on the left?
Yes, it does right here.
And this is what it looked like when you got there on the 28th?
Yes, it does.
We can go to 241, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 241?
That is the washer and dryer in the laundry room.
And do you know which one is the washer and which one's the dryer?
I believe the one on the left is the washer.
And Detective Farrell, I'm gonna have to ask you to speak up loudly because when you're facing the TV, voice is going that way. And these people. So let's go to People's Exhibit 242 at this time. What do we see in People's Exhibit 242?
Large mound of clothing on top of the washer and the dryer.
And is that what it looked like when you initially got to the residence?
Yes, it does.
And did you do anything to look through this clothing?
Myself personally, no.
Did anybody do that?
Detective John Price did.
And were you there when he was doing that?
I was not there when he was initially looking through it, but he called me up once he was looking through that.
And why did he call you up? Do you know?
He found a pair of shoes with that seemed out of place to him with a pink residue on the bottom of the soles.
We go to 243, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 243?
A little bit closer shot over top of the washer.
244? What do we see in 244?
These are the shoes that Detective Price pointed out to me.
And is that what they look like when you got into the laundry room?
Yes.
And you talked about some kind of, did you say pink substance on the bottom of these shoes?
Correct.
What did you think that substance was?
There was suspicion that it was possibly blood and had been attempted been washed, but had soaked into the sole issue.
Why did you have a suspicion of that?
Just based on our experience and the time that we've seen blood-soaked clothing, it just seemed out of place. It seemed very strange to us at that point.
So is this one of the instances that we were talking about when we started out, that you didn't necessarily know what you were looking for, but if you saw something out of the ordinary, you're gonna make note of it?
Yes.
And so what did you do upon seeing these shoes?
We photographed those, and then I also took swabs of the bottom of both of the shoes.
And in this particular shoe, which shoe is which?
This is the left foot, and that would be the right foot.
Could you point out on the right foot any areas of discoloration that you've been talking about?
Right up through here. This picture is a little hard to see, but basically on the indentations of the pattern of the sole, there was the pink residue.
Okay. If we can go to People's Exhibit 245, please. What do we see in People's Exhibit 245?
This is where it had soaked into the foam on the shoe and gave that discoloration all throughout it.
And just so the record's clear, you're using a pointer to point out looks like in the middle of the shoe where there's a crease. You're saying there's some discoloration there?
Correct.
Is that the area that you swabbed with regards to the right bottom of the shoe?
Correct. Right up in this area here.
And if you would resume your seat, there's a brown envelope marked 246. I believe it's going to be on your right-hand side. Do you see that?
Uh, 246. Okay, there we go.
246. You got that?
Yes, sir.
What is People's Exhibit 246?
It states that it's one package of 2 swabs from women's black and white Nike shoes.
And is that the swab that you took from this shoe?
Yes, it is.
And how do you know that?
Because I placed it into this envelope, and it was later taken to evidence and then inputted into evidence by Detective Perry.
And you need to open that up to know that that's what's in that envelope.
No.
At this time, I'd move to admit People's Exhibit 246.
Defense? Exhibit 246 will be admitted. Go ahead.
We can now publish 247.